Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 6.5 Decode Summit, Data as Infrastructure Decoded. My name is Brad Shimmin. I'm an analyst with the Futurum Group, and today it's my pleasure to sit down with Steve Kearns, GM of Search Solutions at Elastic. He and I are going to unpack how Elastic is redefining search and context engineering to power more accurate, cost-efficient, and mission-ready AI. So welcome to our Decode Summit, Steve.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So to start us off, enterprises are absolutely racing to adopt AI and agentic AI in particular. But there's one truth that's become painfully evident, and that is that AI is only as good as the context it has access to. So, given that, I want to start us off by Steve just talking a little bit about how your team at Elastic there is focusing on this use case of essential AI context engineering. So, why do you see context as being so fundamental to AI success, and what does that mean, especially for enterprises that are already sort of steeped or inured in the ideas of like this decentralized and decoupled data architecture, where they've already
Yeah.
separated compute. They're using federated queries for everything and data catalog
Yeah.
to try to figure out where everything is. What advice would you give those companies that are looking to leverage their AI without having to re-architect all of that?
It's a great question. I think you nailed it at the very beginning. Successful AI powered applications, whether that's agents or conversational AI, it all depends on getting the right business data, the right context from your business into that context window of the LLM so that it can actually give you an accurate answer. And like the way I think about it is LLMs, they are this wonderful bastion of general world knowledge. You ask it a general question about anything in the dictionary, anything out on the internet, and they're remarkable at being able to retrieve sort of interesting and useful answers. But in the context of your business, they don't know anything. They don't know
No.
your job. They don't know your role. They don't know your company or where you fit, who your competitors are. And so all they know are what you provide them in the context window. And so
Yeah.
when a lot of people, and you read a lot about this concept of context engineering, how do I get the right tools, the right context to the language models? A lot of that is actually, I think, is sort of almost like focused on the wrong end of the problem. You see a lot, how
Mm.
do I manage the context window length? How do I make sure that the memory and history is tracked properly? Those are very important problems. But for a lot of businesses, you should actually start by saying, do I know where the right data is? Do I have access to that right data? Can I find the relevant subset of that data to provide to the model? Because if I don't do that, then all the rest of that context engineering and context management doesn't matter. First, you have to get the right information, the relevant data. Then you need to manage it effectively in the context window and all of the rest of the moving parts. And so this has been something that we've worked very closely with our customers on now for quite a while. You can sort of think of at Elastic, we're the company behind Elasticsearch. This is a search engine, a vector database, a column store, with all of these capabilities that make it really easy. We give you very powerful tools to retrieve the right kind of answer in the right shape for the question that you're trying to answer through the LLM. And that idea of being able to get relevant answers, and sometimes that's the best one document that contains the answer. Sometimes that's an aggregation over the historic cases that were opened by this customer. But that ability to both look at data over time, individual documents and their relevance is really necessary because the range of questions that get asked are really wide. And so I'd say, to folks who are thinking about this, first, any of these use cases that you start thinking about sort of deploying AI to automate, to sort of improve the experience, start by saying what data is needed to do that and how do I get access to that data? What systems have it? How do I bring a relevant answer out of all of those different sources of data?
Yeah, and that bringing the relevant answer is the tough part. I've found because it's one thing to sort of say, yep, I recognize that this model stopped learning in December of 2024. Therefore, I need to bring data to it. But getting the right data and making sure you have access to it and knowing that it's valid and all that is very difficult. Our studies, we've run a number here on this, and right after security, the biggest concern is data quality and accessibility and security. So it's a tough one. And I love that you mentioned Elastic's history, and I want to pause this actually, Steve, because I feel like it's easy to forget where companies come from, and you guys have such a rich heritage that I want to stop and talk about that for a second. So, you know, traditionally, one of the challenges with enterprise search, which is what you guys have historically been known for, was that cost of centralizing the data and storing it. It sometimes wasn't worth the pain of doing so. So I want to know how you're thinking about, with that history, how you're thinking about AI agents and how they might change those economics, because it's not the same as it was even 6 months ago. How does Elastic, in other words, help organizations sort of get over those or make or optimize those kinds of traditional trade-offs?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's probably a couple of aspects that have been challenging in sort of like the classic enterprise search side of the world. There is like a cost element in terms of how efficient can you store and make this information searchable, which, by the way, has gotten a lot more complicated as you start to do vector search and semantic search. Right, this idea of taking in text and documents and generating a machine readable representation, generating vectors or embeddings on these documents, it can be very large and it can be very costly to run and to operate. These kinds of semantic search infrastructure and so forth. And so I think
Yeah.
there's like a cost element, and on the cost side, this is an area where being a search engine, being a vector database, having a column store in the database, in the data store, enables us to sort of make smart choices about how we store data. And so in just the last year, I think Elasticsearch itself, across really whether you're storing logs in Elastic or documents or vectors, we've improved the storage efficiency, the indexing throughput, and the query speed on pretty much every axis that you can imagine. And because this is so central to, like, this is our whole world, right? Where we invest all of our time, that's been really valuable. But I also think AI has changed some of what data you bring in and how you shape it.
Mm.
So the other big challenge with a classic enterprise search is you said, hey, I'm going to bring in all of the data across all systems in my entire company and put a single search box across it all and put that in front of all my users. That is multiplying data security problems, data access and
Yes.
availability,
Yes.
quality, every user. And I think what AI has shown us is that the value in these conversational experiences is so much greater that I can actually start thinking about individual teams and functions within my company and giving them so much more value with a
Mm.
single use case that it earns the right to be a part of their daily routine and daily life. And the types of data are much more contained. If I think about a customer support use case or something like that, I've got cases from customers, got my documentation, my knowledge base, maybe a couple other sources. That's a solvable problem that you can get the data, you can centralize it, and then you can measure, is this actually working? And that
Yeah.
ability to sort of do this in a focused way has been, I think, transformative for finding projects and helping them be successful, because that one initiative for that one team is very focused, and you can solve that problem really well with a system like Elasticsearch powering it.
And I know you guys have actually done quite a bit of work with tools like Agent Builder to try to accelerate time to value for enterprises that are trying to do that. And I
Yeah.
love that. And I think that, if we can, I'd like to ask you, how important that sort of idea you mentioned a few moments ago is to building agents. And that idea is not just context, but the relevancy of the context. Because you said, for instance, it might be just a single sentence, or it might be a document, or it might be an aggregation over time. And so it's
Yeah.
the relevance that counts. And so I want to ask you, why does that matter in a world where, I have, because I use this every day for a number of tasks, a model that has a million plus context window, and the
Yeah.
temptation is just put it all in there and let the model
Sure.
figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's a great question. Yeah, and we hear this sort of thing a lot at different points in time. I think there's a couple of different reasons for it, actually. So if you start and you think about the agent builder feature that we just recently announced, the reason we built it is that when you look at how hard it is, how many steps you as a developer have to go through or your teams have to go through to actually build an AI agent, there's a lot.
yeah,
You have to pick an orchestration framework, pick an underlying vector database, figure out what embedding model you're going to use to sort of like fill that, connect all of the connectors to that data source. Then you need to think about a UI, and then you need to do memory management. And the number of steps is unbelievable. And so we said, well, look, Elasticsearch is a system that has these kinds of capabilities for providing relevance on top of a broad range of data, whether that's single document best answer or an aggregation over time on metadata or purely structured data. We have support for those kinds of queries as well. And we said, how easy can we make it to get started? And we said, well, why does it even have to, why can't we just put an agent in the box and then let people build from a starting point that's smart and customize it with custom tools and custom queries, customize it with custom workflows and multiple steps that you can engage external systems. And so this doesn't have to be how everybody builds their final application, but that starting point of saying, how hard should it be to get started, is a really important place to begin. Now, it still doesn't address the large context window. So I think these big models, when you start to see these things in practice and you start to feel them, if you were to actually pack the context window to 1 million, and you were to ask a question, even to the most expensive, publicly available large language models, it's expensive. Even forget the cost for a minute. The amount of time that LLM spends crunching on 1 million tokens is like, it's minutes. It's a really long time. And users are much more patient. I'm shocked. I love it because they're getting better answers. They're willing to be patient. But like, time is money and time is time. Like, this is a really important investment that you make. And so the larger that context window, the response time, it's like quadratic. It's incredible how much more time that takes, and the answers are lower quality. And so if I can save you time, get you an answer that's higher quality, higher accuracy, and do it significantly faster, retrieval in Elasticsearch takes milliseconds. I'm not flipping that to seconds or tens of seconds for just parsing the query. And so that idea of sort of using the best tools for the job, it's not just about the time, it's not just about the money, but that combined experience, that's actually how users evaluate, is this an application that I'm going to come back to? And at the end of the day, that answer quality is a really, really critical piece. And even if I pack the whole context window with all of the documents that had all the answers, that still doesn't do an aggregation. The models are not good at using that and turning that into a time series question. And so this idea of saying the range of questions is almost unbounded that are going to come into these conversational experiences. And you have to have a system that can respond to that. And so with Agent Builder, we sort of pre-built in. It's detecting what kind of query you're asking. It's looking at the mappings of the data, figuring out some of this stuff in a fully automated way that at least works pretty well out of the box. And then you can tune it. And that shows people, I think, very quickly what's possible in a sense that was like hard to really get a feel for in any other way.
Yeah, I like that a lot because it is so tempting to just stuff the context window. And I think a lot of people don't realize, as you just said so nicely, that, you may think that you're getting value out of it, but it's costing you money, and it's perhaps not as efficient or even correct in doing so, because there's this concept of attention, and the attention looks like a U if you look at the beginning and the end of the context window, and everything in the middle of that it has no idea what's there. So you have to be smart about how you send that relevant contextual data, and if you can do that sub milliseconds, that's a chef's kiss. I very much agree. And that like, oh, and actually, I know this might seem a little bit odd, but the idea of what you're sending to these models these days seems to hinge so much upon that semantic search that I wanna go back to vectors and talk about vector stores, because it's an area that I'm fascinated by, and it always feels like the embedding models we use in some ways are more magical than the transformer models, but vector stores have commoditized extremely rapidly. You cannot throw a brick without hitting one, or you probably didn't even know you're using one, and it's just there for you. So given that, as a vendor who's looking to simplify that stack, as you were just talking about, how do you differentiate? Because it can't be just about how fast you can index and embed, and it can't be just how many algorithms you support for semantic search. Those are all known entities and can be achieved through however. So how do you guys go about differentiating for that? What does that look like?
Yeah, it actually goes back to what does it take to get the best relevance? And then what does it
Hmm.
take to run this thing in production for real? And I think both of those aspects are really important. So when you think about getting good relevance, one big part of that is like vectors are amazing. Vector search, the embedding models, doing that kind of a sort of numeric matching and this sort of like, cosine similarity across these unbelievably large sort of vectors of numbers. It's amazing that this works.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the best results that you get out of the box actually combine traditional lexical search, sort of keyword search, with vector search. And that ability, we call that hybrid search. There's different ways to talk about it, but that ability of combining the best of both worlds in out of the box. If I know nothing about your use case or your environment, that's what I would recommend is do hybrid search, because you're going to get exact matching when that matters, and you're going to get, or like, with lemmatization and stemming and things like that, and you're going to get meaning matching on the meaning when that matters. And so, a lot of the different kinds of evaluations that we see show this, that you get better results with hybrid. So part of that is just, can the system support that in an efficient and effective way? And then what kinds of levers do you have to control the relevance beyond just match vectors, do a BM25 on the lexical data? What other tools do I have? Can I filter on geospatial data? Can I filter on other properties that I know about the user? Can I prioritize and weight between these different factors? A mature search engine like Elasticsearch, we've had these kinds of capabilities for a long time. And so this ability to say, look, hopefully things work easily for you, but in the real world, there's a lot of complexity in all data and all use cases and all scenario. And do you have the tools available to get great relevance? And with Elasticsearch, the answer is yes. We are the sort of most flexible, most powerful when it comes to just a range of retrieval sort of capabilities.
Yeah.
The second part is, will your teams actually want to run this in production? And you think about, what does it take? Like, if I'm going to be searching across all of my documents, the view that you have of the internal data is probably different than the view that I have. How do you
Oh, yeah.
enforce that? At what level of the stack do you enforce that? Enforce it at the data store level. In Elasticsearch, we have field level security, document level security, very mature capabilities. We integrate with your single sign-on systems, both on the UI end or via APIs. Like, this ability to have a mature and secure environment is critical. And it's also critical when you think about, what does the real world look like? Some people have a very simple life. They live in a single region or in a single data center or something like that. But there are a lot of folks out there who've got an infrastructure that spans multiple regions, or a customer base that spans multiple regions. And how do I
Yes.
keep these different data centers in sync? How do I make sure the data is near where the users are going to be, or that I can federate across these different environments? And so, these are the kinds of capabilities when you think about. It's easy to run a proof of concept on my laptop, but when I think about the range of things that are needed for that last mile of like user acceptance with accuracy and IT acceptance from a security perspective, that's where we really do exceedingly well. And I think more and more people are realizing that earlier in the cycle, that, oh, I'm going to need this range of capabilities. And so at the beginning, it was like, show me a vector database, any vector database. And now people are starting to ask these questions, say, well, how will I handle field and document level security? How will I manage this both in the cloud and in my on-prem environment? How will I handle the details of relevance when it gets real, when we put this in front of our users?
Yeah, the complexities of maintaining separate systems alone is a huge detriment, and so I love this. The idea of converged systems like what you guys have, and I think that what it does is it gives you the ability to basically have the data represented in different ways. So,
That's right.
I can come to open a query box and say, for housing, let's say, and show me houses with two bathrooms that look like this, and are in a great neighborhood with a Starbucks nearby, and do it with one query. you know
Yes,
that
exactly.
that's worth a
And by
lot.
the way, and it's not just the upfront, the first time you want to ask a question like that, you're not going and saying, oh, well, let me go add all these indexed columns and things like that. The beauty of a
Yeah,
system like Elastic is all the data that you bring in, all the fields, all the information, searchable by default. It's available for to be queried. And it's sort of like how we live. We expect you're going to want to use this. And so the defaults are all geared around making that accessible, making that searchable for you. So you don't have to
yeah.
choose in advance, or kind of like have this long iteration cycle to say, well, I want to add this one more property, or the AI was looking to try to query this field, but it couldn't. Nope. That's not a thing that generally happens inside Elastic. You can generally query all the data that you bring in.
Yeah, but you bring up a great point, which is, don't make developers angry. You want them to be very happy, I think what happens quite often in this space of the technology industry is that the barrier of entry is so low that you just basically end up with technology because it was easy to adopt, and now it becomes inertia, a problem of inertia to move away from it. And so a lot of that comes from developer mindshare. If
That's
you
right. Yeah.
stand up a really sexy, vector store with slick, simple APIs, people are going to start using it. Then it's maybe a problem, So I'm curious, what is Elastic's view on that, on how to build a developer experience that's not just about like, what's the best choice for production, like you were just talking about, but also
Yeah.
the most joyful and productive experience for
I like that.
developers. What do you
I
feel
like
about
that
that?
framing of joyful. Yeah, I like the joyful framing. I feel like that's an important thing that we sometimes forget when we're building some of these systems. Um, Look, I think this is one of the areas that at Elastic we've evolved a little bit over the years. I think we've always been known, pretty well known, I think, as having just the most capability, just the broadest
Yeah,
range of
yeah.
API surface area for information retrieval problems. With vector search, that surface area gets even wider, which is great. But the ease of use end is something that we've been focusing on a lot over the last couple of years from a developer perspective. And the way that I think about a lot of this stuff is it should actually be like this notion of a progressive disclosure of complexity. So when you walk up to, you shouldn't have to know about embedding models until you need to customize your embedding model. You shouldn't need to know about sort of like a hybrid search or what's going on inside the box until you want to tweak it and weight it differently. And
Mm.
so a lot of the work that we've done at Elastic has been saying, well, look, how do we make it easy so that when you put text into Elasticsearch, if you want to generate embeddings against that, both at index time and at query time, you shouldn't have to learn about embedding models. You should just say, make this field a semantic text field. And we will see it. We will use our default first party embedding model to generate the embeddings when you bring the data in. And when you query that field, you'll see, you're querying this field. What embedding model was used? Okay, let's use that to generate the embeddings at query time. And so this idea of how simple can we make these complex concepts and then still give you the power to open the box, right? We'll use our first party embedding model. It's amazing. And by the way, we actually just joined forces. We acquired a company called Gina AI that is a leader in search and sort of like these embedding and re-ranking models, these retrieval
Oh,
models.
nice. Yeah.
And it gives us these wonderful out of the box capabilities. And so most people won't ever need to customize. They won't ever need to go and learn, how do embedding models work? How do I pick one? How should I think about it? For the most part, it should just work. But when you want to, we have a pluggable infrastructure where you can plug in any model running in any service that you choose, so that you'll have that flexibility and that ability to say it works. But when I need to, I can open the box and actually configure every detail of that information retrieval pipeline, both at indexing and at query and in the query language. That's really what we're after. And if we can get that balance right, we end up sort of setting people up for success because they get that early win. And then if and when they need to sort of like go a little deeper, or configure security in a different way, whatever it might be, those features are there for you. And so that's actually the mission that we've been on. I wouldn't say we're done. We'll never be done. The idea of this
Yeah.
delightful or joyful experience is impossible. It's fleeting, but it's something that has been a big focus, and I think we've made a lot of progress. And it's this maybe one last thing. It's a funny aspect about Elastic. We've been known in the industry for kind of a long time, and I think everybody has this point in time memory of like, when did they last use or interact with or play with Elastic?
we do. Yes, I am one
Yeah,
of those.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It's like I love it on the one hand. I've been at Elastic for 11 years, so like I've lived this myself. But it's like we have to update the baseline that people have of an expectation, because the experience you have today doing vector search, and using some of our newer query languages like ESQL, it's very different. It's much more natural feeling than it felt, or you might imagine it would be if you'd used this even just 2 or 3 years ago.
It's all about meeting them where they are today and where they're going to be tomorrow without changing the back end. That's
Exactly.
what they want. Yeah, thanks for this. I appreciate your time. So everybody, this wraps our keynote conversation with Elastic's Steve Kearns. And Steve, thank you so much for joining us and for your terrific insights, man. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
And everyone, to dive deeper into how today's leaders are decoding the next wave of enterprise AI and data innovation, stay tuned for more sessions here at 6.5 Decode Summit. We also invite you to go to 65media.com and explore all of our conversations there. Thank you.